Hey everybody, David from Flash by VCycleNet here. I want to do a tech talk on throttles and fly-by-wire and how it's progressed and why now we're seeing so many throttle position sensor errors or failures, and why even on the newer generation I think we're going to see more of them and what effect that has on the bike. So we're going to start off with my 2001 R1. This is actually carbureted, so she's for sale if anybody's interested. $7,000, shameless plug. So on this bike, it's carbureted, and we have a thing called a choke that when we want to start it, we got to apply the choke. And when we turn the throttle, we have throttle cables that lead down to the bike and to the end of the carburetors. There's 4 of them on this. And when we turn it, we actually open a butterfly up on the carburetor. Now, on most carburetors, on most motorcycles, are what's called CV or constant velocity carburetors. So when you twist the throttle, the slide doesn't necessarily come up with exactly how you twist the throttle. Actually, it doesn't. It's not connected. What there is there is a slide that has a vacuum hole in it, and so as you turn the throttle, creates the vacuum, and that lifts the slide up. And we used to adjust how fast that slide would come up to get better throttle response by drilling holes in it. It would make the slide come up. There's a hole there already, but we'd enlarge the hole, and that would make the slide come up faster. So you'll hear a lot of old timers say, I missed the feel of a carbureted bike. And I'm not arguing that, but there was like a fudge factor built into it, because no matter how fast I did this, the slide would only move a little or come up and down a little bit. So if you got basically your wrist, your throttle control didn't have to be as precise when riding a well set up set of carburetors. One of the exceptions to that is sometimes people would install flat slide carburetors, and flat slides would come up as fast as you turn your wrist. So on a flat slide carburetor bike, you had to be cautious with how fast you opened the throttle, because you could literally bog the bike down by opening up the throttle too fast. The next bike we're going to talk about is this 1998 Ducati. It's a 748 or 916, but it's a 996. And this is a fuel injected bike. So with fuel injection, we have a cable that comes down to the throttle, and then it goes to a throttle position sensor, usually on the left side, but somewhere on the sides of the fuel injector, of the fuel injection unit. And what happens is as you open it, there is a signal sent to the computer, and that tells it how far up it's opened, and then it looks at how many RPMs you're at, throttle position, and it has a table, and it tells you this is how long it turns the injector on. Much different than the carburetor, where the amount of gas that is supplied is adjusted through needle height and main jets. I know how to do it. I've done it a bunch of times, but don't miss that at all. Much prefer going into a chart and just adjusting the fuel accordingly. Most fuel injected bikes, non-fly-by-wire, like those 2 over there, most regular fuel injected bikes have what's called a secondary throttle plate that's behind the main butterfly. And that secondary throttle plate is how they maintain velocity. So especially on sport bikes that rev out really high, just like I talked about flat slide carburetors on the other one, if when we open the throttle that on a bike that it could achieve 15,000 RPMs or even 12,000, if we're at 3,000 RPMs and we whack the throttle and everything opened up, the velocity of the intake would fall on its face, the bike would fall on its face and just run poorly. So they put secondary throttle plates in there to maintain that velocity. On most bikes with secondary throttle plates, we can improve their performance by opening the secondary throttle plates quicker than they did from the factory. Some people like to remove the secondary throttle plates on some bikes. It's kind of a band-aid. I prefer to leave them in place and tune them properly if I can. So on a fuel injecting bike, there's a fuel injector that provides gas, and fuel injectors are either off or on. So if you're getting 50% throttle, the fuel injector isn't halfway open, it's fully open for half the time. And so that's the basics of a fuel injection bike. And fuel injection with non-flying by wire it's been around since the early 2000s and really didn't change till fly-by-wire bikes. First fly-by-wires, I guess thinking it's the R6, was around 2006. One of the things I forgot to talk about on the fly-by-wire bike, we were talking earlier on the R1 about the slide coming up and how that was like a fudge factor built in. Well, on a fly-by-wire bike, it does, barring what's in the throttle tables, but it does exactly what you ask it to do the second you ask it to do it. So if you are hand on your throttle, that's what your throttle is going to do. There's no built-in softness because of the slide and the vacuum and having to come up and down. And I think that's where sometimes where people struggle, especially if you get a bike, especially on a lot of stock motorcycles that are overly lean off idle. So the throttle response is really touchy. And then you have this where you don't, it's super sensitive. So it does what you ask it to do when you ask it to do it. Remember to hit subscribe for more motorcycle related content and hit that like button if you enjoyed. Thanks, guys.